Greetings, YouTube. I want to talk about violent protest and how our enemies on the right are going to use that term to their advantage as they begin to pretend and put on the act of professional victim. As we all know, 2 weeks ago, and it happened on the 2nd and it happened on the 3rd, I think, of February, Milo Yiannopoulos' event was canceled at UC Berkeley. He was invited to the campus by college Republicans to speak, but people came to protest Yiannopoulos' shtick of soft shoe friendly fascism, and while they were fixing to do just that, they got a little hungry and decided to make a little fire for weenies and marshmallows. I mean, hell, shit like that happens. I've come to a protest many times and I've gotten hungry. And every now and then you're in a mood for roasted weenies and some goddamn marshmallows. What's wrong with that? So that's what happened there on the campus. So his event was canceled. Then a night later at NYU, Gavin McInnes came to speak, and he was able to speak. I don't see what the big deal was. Now, granted, somehow some spray of pepper got in his eyes. He then took to the media, kind of like the way Trump does, to play professional victim. The thing that irks me the most when it comes to the professional victim narrative that we hear from Milo Yiannopoulos and Gavin McInnes, but Gavin McInnes the most, is the cognitive dissonance that's attached to it. Now, these guys, I haven't seen them taken to social media at all. When the counter protesters came bravely to the old Trump rallies during his campaign, I specifically remember the Heimbeck video that I had uploaded last year, where, as we saw, there were peaceful protesters who came to one particular Trump rally, and those counter protesters were beaten, spat on. We definitely have the visual of a young woman pushed around and called all kinds of names. But now we need to listen to the bleatings of Milo's supposed political repression from the hard left, as he put it. And then you've got Gavin, who says that the thing that stung the most, more than the pepper spray in his eyes, was when he was called a Nazi. Maybe you don't know who Gavin McInnes is. If you are a reader of Vice, which I'm not, like myself, Gavin McInnes was in the hardcore punk scene. And that's basically what he did. He took a lot of the DIY ethic from the punk scene. If you want to make a magazine, you made a magazine. If you wanted to make a band, you made a band. You wanted to go on tour, you rented a van, you got in the van and you went on tour. In other words, it was the answer to the corporate way of doing music and the corporate way of building a music scene. And that's what the hardcore punk scene was all about. Gavin came out of that, and what he did was he took this sort of zine gonzo ethic, if you will, and then he applied it to the magazine that he co-founded, which was, of course, Vice. So he always walked around with this sort of swagger, being this libertarian, edgy right-winger. And he liked putting on a show about how tough he was because, you know, he took some boxing lessons. He's done a few little amateur boxing matches here and there with a bunch of other hipsters with noodle arms. And that's pretty much his deal. That's his shtick, basically. He's this tough guy that's straight from the hip, right-winger, former punk rocker, blah, 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 blah. Now he wants to play victim. Fuck this guy. But I really don't want to talk about these men and them not being able to speak publicly, because it's not really about them not being able to speak publicly. This is about preventing an agenda from being normalized, being popularized, and taking root in public spaces. It really is just that simple. A violent protest. There's a gray area when you want to say if a protest is violent, if indeed someone is going to get pepper sprayed in their eyes, or someone just randomly getting punched in the face by another individual. But really what goes on in a lot of the counter protests against reactionary speech and hate speech are windows finding themselves smashed by rocks. That's not violent. That's not a violent protest. It's a window getting smashed. It's an inanimate, non-living object being smashed by another inanimate, non-living object. So ignore this whole label of the so-called violent protest. It's bullshit. Of course, I totally respect those of you who are on the left and you feel differently about that. I get that part. But what's really going on here, if anything, is a very healthy radicalization of the left. I think that people who were liberals last year are now no longer liberals this year. They're probably considering themselves revolutionary leftists, and they're participating in these kinds of protests, and I strongly encourage it. All right, that's all I have to say about that. This is the Garage Autonomist.